So what we need to talk about now is to start to look at our ethical and legal considerations in our businesses and the way we market them. Okay, obviously we need to start taking these into account fairly quickly because there are, compliance requirements that we have when we run our businesses, and we need to make sure that we stay abreast of that and not get ourselves into trouble. Right, so there's a couple of different schools of thought on that. We're going to start to explore it and start to go through it. But the first thing we start to think about is understanding the impact on the individual consumer. Right, so consumers have many, many concerns about how well marketing systems serve their interests and what information they're getting. Okay, sometimes, actually quite a lot of reviews will show you that consumers are a little bit wary and sometimes a little bit negative towards feeling they're being marketed to or sold on something. Okay, that's how they often sort of feel that they're being sold. All right. So their concerns are, from a consumer point of view, consumers are usually worried about things like high prices. They get worried about poor quality behind goods. They're sold one thing, it turns out to be another. Also, things like dangerous products being sold onto the market. Okay, products that haven't been tested, haven't been checked. That's a concern for them. They don't like to be misled, and they're concerned that some of the advertising claims out there are quite misleading. They also start to think about deception. Okay, where there's misleading. Okay, and then there's deception. Okay, now misleading means that, well, you gave me some of the information, but it led me to a conclusion that wasn't quite right. Deception is you just outright lied. Okay, so that's a bit of a concern there, that they feel that sometimes it could be misleading or deceptive advertising. It makes promises it can't keep. They're also concerned by things like breaches of privacy become a real concern for consumers. They're also concerned about high pressure selling. We've all seen that high pressure, buy now, or, we thank you for your call, but it's only here until Friday, or all these, you're the 5th customer, but if you don't buy it now, you'll lose it. So that sort of high pressure environment, people really don't like it. It's one that really strikes a chord and you've got to stay very mindful of. They also don't like planned obsolescence, and that's a thing there where you design a product to basically fail after a period of time. And we've all seen that one. You buy something, it has a 12-month warranty, and 12 months and 1 week later, that's when it breaks. And it's almost, you can set a clock by how magically it falls apart at a predetermined period of time, or it's replaced every 12 months by a new revision or a new model that replaced the old one, even though the old one worked perfectly. Okay? And the other thing is that they're also wary about receiving poor service for disadvantaged customers. Okay, so that we treat one set of customers one way, and then we sort of limit or cut down on the other set of customers and not treat them quite as well. Right, so when we start to break this thing down, we start thinking about the criticisms. And the criticisms that we start to look at is there's really sort of 4 that we're looking at here. Okay, and on one side what we have over here what's called cultural pollution. Okay, basically that when we're doing our marketing practices, pollution, only one there. When we're considering our marketing practices, we're just pouring a whole lot of gumph out there that it's not really adding to the culture, it's exploiting the culture or watering things down or, treating people like idiots to some degree, I suppose. On the other hand, we come up here with, the next criticism would be there's too much political power. Okay, that marketing contains all the power. The message is out there, they control the message, they put a message out there that's often hard to dispute, and that creates a lot of concern for the consumers out there, right? If they can't challenge it, there's this prevailing thing, and we saw that, back in the past when, cigarettes were considered a healthy product and we had Marlboro men and they were convincing people to smoke, smoking was a good idea. It was very hard to go back against tobacco companies and say, well, actually, that's not true, okay? The other thing is that it starts to create too much materialism. Okay, by always pushing stuff onto the market, it creates this need for the stuff. It almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They keep telling people they need these things to be happy, so people start trying to buy them. They're not happy, then they tell them, well, you'll be happy if you buy the next thing. Okay, so that's not entirely good. And then there's a bit of a lack of social goods over here. Okay, so this is really starting to turn into, well, what's the benefit to broader society here? We're creating a materialistic culture. We're polluting the culture we do have by just, spamming a whole lot of guff into there. We've got a marketing, basically a marketing industry which controls a lot of power, controls the message. And what are they really putting back into society rather than trying to convince us of ways to take things from us in society? All right, so this really becomes a real concern, and they're the main criticisms towards this whole process. So moving on a little bit from there, and getting that out, we start to get down to the next layer of arguments, or the next bunch of problems that people have. And the next problems that they have is that they feel that the acquisition of competitors becomes a problem. Because what happens is the good marketers build great companies that then start to take over all the smaller companies. What that means is there becomes a real lack of competition. Okay, acquisition can often lead to lack of competition. And we've seen that in this country to some degree. We had a whole bunch of different internet service providers. Eventually they came along like Pac-Man in that game from the 70s and 80s where they kept eating up all the smaller ones. And very quickly all we found was we ended up with only a couple of internet providers. So there wasn't really a whole lot of choice for the consumer. And once those internet providers all realised they can all charge pretty much the same fee, all they did was pretty much lock into each other, and that way there's no real choice for the consumer. You have to go with one of the very few brands, and that's all you have. Same with the banking industry, it consolidated down. We have a 4 pillars policy in this country, but at any time the government could change that, and then we'd just find that competition went as the big guys swallow the little guys, and that's it. Okay, so it takes that away from you. The other problem is when those things happen, it becomes really hard for another person to come in. It's very hard to come into an industry where there's a few major big players and they dominate it. Imagine trying to be the next cola soft drink to try and take on Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Okay, they pretty much own it. It's pretty much theirs. It becomes really hard. It's a barrier to entry. Okay, in order to make an entry, it's very hard for the next person along. They can't necessarily put all the funds in. They can't get to a position where they can enter there. So basically, it locks a few big companies into being the only providers, and consumers don't like that. They like to have the choice, and they don't feel that that's happening, if you've got those dominating players. And what that really creates is their last concern, which is, unfair. Okay, it becomes an unfair marketing practice. And what happens there is that, when someone does try to come in, the big guys can just cut a bunch of prices, and just cut, and we've seen that particularly with airlines. They just cut the prices down, starve the new competitor, so the new competitor can't compete with them because they don't have the same money the big guys do, and then the little guy just falls back over again, and away we go. So then obviously what happens is once they exit, the prices merrily go back up again. So, it's a bit cheeky, but these are the sort of things that start to bother consumers about what's happening in the marketing industry, or what marketing can create. Okay, so the reason we're talking about this is not because you're going to do it, but you need to have at the back of your mind how marketing is perceived, so you can make sure that you're making good choices when you're going out there and starting to put the information to your potential target market. All right, so we've had a few sort of conversations there. What that has effectively led to is an attempt by society to start to control or to regulate marketing. Okay, because back in the old day, we had those, as we say, we had the Marlboro Man. Okay, and the Marlboro Man was king, and he smoked cigarettes and everything's fine. They were pushing that out there. There were no real controls. Consumers weren't protected, and they could basically make any claims they want. So what we've started to do now is we've started to see that ethical business practices have come in. That what we've got is we've got regulation saying that, well, hang on, we don't like the Marlboro Man, so we're going to put controls on that, and we're going to start to legislate how and what you can market and what information you have to tell us. Okay, so no more of that crazy stuff. There are laws that need to be followed, and that's been as a result of that consumer sentiment. Okay, so following on, what we start to talk about is now that consumers have understood how these things work, what we really have is consumerism as a concept. And what's really happened with our consumers since about the 1960s, when marketing became a thing, and that was really the halcyon days of when marketing kicked on, they've become better educated. All right, so what's happened is consumers are now better educated than they were before. Okay, they're not necessarily just believing everything they're told. They've got great research tools available to them. They can find information very quickly and very painlessly. The other thing is that the products have become actually more complex. So we're now meeting complex products. Okay, back in the 1960s when things were coming out, products were usually fairly simple and easy to understand. Trying to explain the latest iPhone to my grandmother is a little bit more of a complicated process, particularly if we really start getting into it. And the other thing is that marketing has raised consumers' expectations. Okay, back in the day, you sort of got what you got. Okay, so back in the day, you had a very limited choice. Your markets weren't that broad. You went to the local shop, and whatever they had was pretty much the one you bought. And we didn't really have massive expectations back then. But over time, because we're accessing now a global market, people expect a pretty high standard. Okay, so what we start to look at is an organised movement of our citizens, okay, and the government towards starting to sort of push that mindset out there as they start to look at the things they're looking for: sustainability, making sure that people are following the things they're supposed to follow, and really doing the right thing by the consumers themselves. Okay, so that's really shaped what's happened. The market's out there, they are informed, they know what's going on, and they're starting to get pretty wise to what's happening. We can't just make the throwaway lines that we used to make once upon a time. They're pretty wise to that. All right. And they also expect a much better product than they may have in the past. So things to think about. Now, as a seller, there's traditional rights you had as a seller. And as a seller back in the day, even today, you start to think about, what are your rights? And you have various different rights, like the ability, to produce a product in a size, so you can produce a product. In a size, a colour, you can basically come up with anything you want. So, your sizes, colour, style, flavour. You can come up with any product you really want, and you can produce that product so long as it's not a hazard to personal health and safety. If there is a health and safety concern there, you have to disclose it. Okay, so that's really what that's looking at. So you're always allowed to produce a product. If there's a health concern, provide a health warning, but you have the right to produce that product. Okay, so you can also charge a price for that product. Okay, so you're starting to be, you have the right to choose a product, provided that there's no discrimination in the price point. Okay, so what we're saying there is we can't sort of say, well, okay, we're going to charge this lot, we're going to discriminate on how we charge. Okay, I don't like those particular people, so we'll charge them more. Those sort of things there. So, we have the right to charge a price. We also have the right to produce any amount of the product. Okay, so no one can really, tell us you need to produce 1,000 of them or 100 of them or however many number. Okay, that choice of how many to make is ours. So we're looking through there. We have the right to choose to produce a product in the first place, to charge a price for that product so long as we're not discriminating against anyone, and also to produce any amount of that product that works for our business. And also, we have the right to use a buying incentive. Okay, so to market that product, tell people about it, change the price of it, lower it, whatever it is, or create a price incentive scheme, as long as we don't lie or are misleading around it. Okay, so they're really our rights: the ability to produce, the ability to charge for the product that we produce, the ability the right to choose how many we make, and also to incentivize people buying that any way we choose, so long as it's not unfair or misleading in what we do. Okay, so as long as we're being upfront, as long as we're telling people the right thing, we're perfectly within our rights to do that. Now, the seller equally has the purchaser also has a set of rights. Okay, so as a buyer, I've got a few rights too, and that is, the right not to buy. Okay, I don't have to buy your product. Okay, just because you're selling it doesn't mean I have to buy it. I have the option to say no to any product that you happen to be selling. Same, I have an expectation that the product is safe. So if I do buy a product from you, I expect that it's safe, or I've been appraised of any risks or warnings associated with that product, and for it to perform as claimed. Okay, so if you're telling me that, your product does a certain thing, then that product needs to be able to do it. Okay, you can't tell me that, it's going to make you taller and faster and better and all these sort of things and make all sorts of crazy claims if you can't back up the claims. The claims have to be deliverable. all right? You can't get into a position where you're sort of saying, well, you know, this is an amazing product, it's great, does this, does that. You must buy it, and then you don't tell me about the safety concerns, all right? So cigarettes would be a prime example there, you know. It's not a safe product, you need to tell me that. You know, I have a right not to buy it, and whatever the goods are, you know, have to perform to standard. We see that on things like cleaning products. You know, if you tell me that this will get the stains out, it has to get the stains out. If I use half a bottle and it doesn't budge, then I have a right to come back to you and have a decent complaint, and really you won't have a leg to stand on. Okay, so think about that. Your rights as a seller to produce and the way you want to produce things, and also the right of the consumer not to have to buy things, the expectation that it'll be safe, and that it does what it says on the box. Okay, so the next consideration we have there is environmentalism. Okay, concern about the environment obviously starting to, well, it has not just starting to, it has been on the radar for some time, okay? It's been a real growing thought. And one of the first thoughts that, you know, people start to think about there is pollution. Okay, so we're starting to see a lot of products, particularly things like plastic bags and plastic objects, okay? Heaps and heaps and heaps of these are made, they're used by consumers and they're thrown away, they end up in landfill or they end up in the oceans. Okay, that starts to create a lot of problems for people. They start to see, you know, all this junk and all this gum flying around, and they want something done about it. Okay. Also, similarly, how much pollution was produced in actually making that product. You know, air pollution, water tables, etc. There's a whole range of things that can get polluted, and you know, create a bit of a problem there for your consumer, and that really is foremost on their mind now. Other concerns are, you know, how it's affecting ecosystems. And when I'm saying about an ecosystem, okay, that might be, you know, we've seen probably the biggest one that's on there at the moment is palm oil has become a problem because it's cutting down a lot of rainforest, and that's driving a lot of creatures out of their homes, and we're seeing the orangutans, etc. There's a whole lot around there about palm oil, and people are starting to ask, is it being ethically produced? Right, massive amounts of forest are being cleared out so that, you know, those palms can be grown, but, you know, it's devastating whole areas of countryside. All right, so as a bunch of consumers, you know, people are starting to get worried about that and starting to question, do they want that in their products? Okay, it will eventually lead to a boycott, and that's what we're seeing, people boycotting products. All right, so we start to look also, once we move outside the ecosystems, to start to think about, well, what are the long-term effects of that? Okay, you know, what are the longer-term effects of the pollution? What are the longer-term effects of the ecosystems changing? You know, back in the 80s, it was all about the ozone layer. You know, people used to have the deodorant cans, chlorofluorocarbons were all the big things at the time, the CFCs, okay, and that was a gas that everyone worked out was actually, you know, possibly contributing to the whole growing of the ozone layer, and that created a problem. People wanted all of a sudden to move away from those because the long-term effect was going to be global warming and a whole bunch of other different areas and different issues out there. So these are the sort of things people are thinking about, all right? And also growth issues, etc. Look, understanding that environmental concerns are right up there is probably pretty king. You know, it's something you really need to factor into your marketing. It really is something you need to consider the whole time, because if you don't, it is going to be something that your consumers raise to you. So being able to talk about being ethical becomes an issue. You need to be able to adopt an ethical marketing position. And what we're talking about there is to respond positively to consumerism and environmentalism to serve their customers' needs, to let them know, hey, look, you know, we understand that as a group of consumers, you have these things in mind, and that's why we are reducing our carbon footprint. That is why we are trying to be sustainable and ethical. That is why we are doing the right things. And not just say it, but actually start to take steps towards it. Okay, don't say anything superficial, because if you say it and you're not doing it, you will be found out, and when you're found out, then they're going to have an even bigger reaction. All right, you know, we're starting to see that. You know, everyone wants to greenify. Make sure that you're, you know, actually involved in making it green, not just giving it a green wash and pretending. All right, so, you know, start to take that position, start to instill that into your employees, let them know that that's what you're about, reinforce the messages through your organization, you know, take actual steps. And the thing is, if you're taking real steps, it's going to save you money in the long run as well, because you're not creating excessive pollution, you're not creating waste, you're thinking about the way you operate. You want sustainability not just for the planet, but you know, you also want to build sustainable principles into your business, because you want to stay in business for a long time, not just grab the short-term buck and then run away quickly. All right, and you know, do the right thing by the planet, do the right thing by your consumers, and you know what? In the longer term, the right thing will happen to you too. So get into a societal marketing. Okay, that's what we're starting to talk about here. So start to consider the consumer's wants. Not just what you want, but what does the consumer want? Okay, what do they want? You know, they want that sustainability. They want all these different things. They want those features. They want products they can trust. They want not to be lied to. They don't want to be misled. They want the right product at the right price at the right time. They don't want unethical things done. They don't want the lowest price and no question about what happens. They are really starting to get pretty switched on out there. Think also about your organisation requirements. Okay, so the requirements of your organisation. What is your platform? What do you need to be doing? What are the key things that you're going to be involved in? What legal obligations do you have that you need to meet? Okay, so are there standards, whatever it happens to be? Okay, think about the long run interests. Okay, as I say, it's not a short-term cash grab. Okay, think about what are from the consumers, what's best for them in the long run. Okay, don't just give them a short-term thing. Try and think about in the long run, how is it going to benefit them and how is it going to benefit society. Okay, how does your product or service contribute to the bigger picture of society? Where do you fit in? Are you creating a better space or a worse space? In the long run, is your organisation doing damage or not doing damage? Okay. How are you putting back into the communities that you come from? Now, that's what we hope that you've been doing, and we really hope that that's the way you've been thinking. But look, at the end of the day, we don't just rely on goodwill alone. And what we've started to see is more and more cases of legislation, which is talking about your legal requirements or legislation. Once again, no plural. Making that mistake, that's okay. Okay, so you need to come up with a legal compliance program within your organisation. So what that's saying is a system designed to see where you might be breaking the law. So what your aim is to do is you're trying to reduce the chance that you accidentally break the law, because obviously not trying to intentionally do it. So how do you come up with a policy? A compliance system within your organisation that is just there to prevent you accidentally doing the wrong thing, to identify where you might, to manage the cases where you may have done something you weren't necessarily supposed to, and reduce your risks. Okay, so a way of checking, vetting, internal standards testing, whatever it happens to be, to make sure that you don't inadvertently put something out there that shouldn't be. To give you a good guide on that, you can go to the standards. Okay, so Standards Australia. Okay, they produce a standard on just about anything, which is really the government requirements. If you've got a product or a service, it's pretty much covered by a standard out there, which says really what's required of you legally to make sure that your product meets a safety standard. If you've got a helmet, it says that the helmet works, it says how the helmet works, what sort of conditions it has to work under, and gives you all the details of that, regardless of what it happens to be. And what that standard does is it actually draws a whole pile of information together for you, from lawsuits that have been out there, opinions on, from legal practitioners. You start to think about getting, your best practices, coupled with all these standards, and that's going to help you build that compliance system. All right? Can't really overstate that enough. Checking your things before you go out there and making sure it does what it says on the box and that you're not accidentally getting into the wrong place. Okay, so there are a couple of different standards you can look at. The standard for marketing, it has a few things in there that you'll start to look at, and becoming a compliant organisation, all right? And the standards for that starts to talk about making sure that you've got a positive commitment, okay? A positive commitment at a board level to being compliant. Okay, so the very top of your organisation, what statements do they need to put out to let your organisation know that you stand for a certain thing? Your monitoring requirements are also covered there. So how often you need to monitor, what do you need to monitor, when. The practice of promoting compliance through your managers so that people aren't just saying they're doing the right thing, they're doing the right thing. Okay, and making sure that you've got enough staff at sufficient levels and sufficient clout to make sure it's being followed through. Okay, coupled with education and training for staff. Okay, if you're managing to do that, you'll be pretty much right. Think about your also your patents. Okay, so if you've got any patents or anything out there that you need to be covering, That's all covered there as well. Register yourself, keep yourself safe. Okay, so the next thing that really leads into is making sure you've got legal education in your organisation. And when we're talking about legal education, just making sure that you've got, that you're really covering a few different sets of relationships. And the first set of, legal education to make sure you're covering the first relationship there is your relationship with your competitors. Okay, you don't want to be breaching any laws in that. You want to make sure that no one's saying anything about competitors they shouldn't, that you're not making any assumptions or assertions out there in public that mislead or might say something that's anti-competition that could get you into trouble. You're not making false promises. You're not talking down on them. You're not doing anything crazy like that. You're just making sure that you're sticking to the truth and you're keeping yourself out of being sued. The next one is your suppliers. Okay, once again, are you using ethically sourced suppliers? Are you making sure everyone's being paid on time? There's no exploitation. You're not going to get yourself into any sort of trouble there, so make sure you're checking the legalese, entering into proper binding contracts, okay, making sure everyone's paid on time, etc. Okay, so that's another series of education there that you need to start building there. You also need to think about things like patents and outside organisation. Okay, that you're registering your patents and making sure that you've got yourself covered, but also that you're not moving on to other people's patented technology. That you're not accidentally appropriating or getting into a position where you're taking information you shouldn't be or using anything you shouldn't be. Okay, because once again, that could lead to you being sued, and we've seen that with some large organisations. Apple, Samsung, that turned into a classic argument there, where all of a sudden everyone's saying, well, hey, you stole our technology. Okay, ends in court, massive millions of dollars paid out. You really got to watch that a little bit closely. And then lastly, just got to check your relationship with industry, okay? Making sure that you're maintaining a positive relationship with the industry, that you're up to date with all the legal requirements in your industry. So if there's anything that relates to you, that you're up to speed on it, whether you need insurance or public liability, whatever's going on in your industry, that you're up to date on that and you've got that information coming in to make sure you stay out of trouble. Okay, so typical laws that you might come into are things like competition laws. You might start to look at contract and consumer law, becomes a bit of an issue there as well. You need to think about the standards out there, so through Standards Australia. You need to think about your product liability. Your marketing communication obviously creates legal implications for you, and the way you're approaching that and the promises you're making. You need to think about your sales and after-sales finance. If you're offering credit or offering money, loans to people, then that needs to be monitored very closely there as well. There's quite a lot of laws in that area. You need to think about franchising. So if your business is splitting off and other people are operating under your name, okay, making sure there's legal protections underneath that, because promises they make are promises you made. And also you need to think about how you're protecting your intellectual property, which is, all your science and your know-how. How are you going to make sure that's covered as well? Right, so there's quite a lot from the legal perspective that you really need to think at. And as marketers, our job is not to be experts in that, but just to be aware that they can create problems for us and to make sure we're aware to at the earliest opportunity, seek professional legal advice. Our job is to know there could be a problem and then go out and find the person who actually knows the answer. Okay, not expected to answer all this by yourself. We're not lawyers. All right, go find someone who is, pay them properly, and make sure they're a good lawyer. All right, great. If we do all that, all those things have sort of given us a bit of an understanding of the world out there. We've thought about the legal aspects. We've thought about the ethical aspects, okay, about being honest and showing our integrity and making sure we're sustainable. If we're doing all those things and we're actually being mindful of the laws and regulations that cover us, then we should have a nice, successful business that doesn't get ourselves into the media on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald or something for all of the wrong reasons. All right, so being mindful of those things. If in doubt, check early and check thoroughly. All right, good luck out there.